Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Migration Podcast. My name is Nasir Nawaz. I'm a registered migration agent. Normally, you see me as a guest in the different programs, different podcasts. Today, I have a guest in our podcast, Manhal Dandashi. And we'll talk about coming trends, the occupations, and that may impact in coming days in Australia about the migration program. And it will be very effective to shape the migration program as an input because migration program is all about demand driven because whatever occupation is required in Australia, a migration program is polished accordingly, and government definitely pay heed to that perspective. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Manal, would you like to introduce yourself, a little bit of the background just for our audience? Because I know, but I just want to record this.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure, no problem. I have, but I'm pretty much new to the migration services field. I did a career switch. I come from many years of finance and investment experience.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly in the United States and in Africa. My first degree was in finance from the United States, and I've lived in many countries and continents. And recently, I've just decided to switch to migration services because I find it to be an extremely exciting field to work in.
Oh, perfect. So I see you have been around in different continents, as you said. And now you settled in Australia and you're in migration industry. So I'll be take advantage of your experience. What do you think, if you observe, what do you think would be the occupation more in demand in coming days in Australia that may drive the migration program in Australia?
Well, to answer your question, I can basically do it in two parts because you gave me keywords in the coming days. Skill shortages are basically, the old traditional ones that we all know and love that have been persistent for a while, such as aged care service providers, disability service providers, accountants, so on and so forth. So those have been on the skilled occupation list for quite a few years now, and they are classified by Jobs and Skills Australia as persistent shortages. They actually refer to them as persistent. But as far as the second part of the answer to your question, in terms of emerging occupations that are in demand, obviously, all of the development and the advancement in technology is making many employers more reliant on artificial intelligence, robotics, that sort of thing. So that reliance that's increasing day by day is creating demand for all kinds of jobs that are related to those kinds of skills. So those would be sort of the newer comers onto the skilled occupation lists as we know them.
So it will, you think, drive and polish the immigration program of Australia?
Very much so. And I think this was part of the, I did a bit of research for this podcast in order to prepare. And there was a study not too long ago, I think it was just in January, earlier this month, that Jobs and Skills in Australia did that advised the Department of Home Affairs on the results of the study, sort of as part of that whole migration reform that Doha is doing, that started a couple of years ago. So not only did Jobs and Skills Australia provide a whole bunch of data 3 years ago as input for the migration reform, but it also keeps updating them as JSA does more studies and more statistics and findings. It keeps updating the Department of Home Affairs as to, hey, add this, remark to, your reform, if that's possible. Of course, we all know that this reform had to be heavily legislated, so some things may not really catch up. But it's still, I think, good for Doha to be receiving these updates from Jobs and Skills.
Input by some research backed by some research, so it helps them for decision making what legislation or what occupation must be given the priority to put it on the skill occupation list or whatever.
Right, and so that with the next round of legislation, these recent advices that Doha is receiving can be considered, for additional occupations onto the list.
Great. Okay, but speaking of the migration, when we talk about, there is a net migration. I often read this word, the net migration. So when I was reading this, there was something, the people coming are less in number than the people leaving Australia, living in a context, they temporary visa holders or citizen or whatever. So kind of this net migration is impacting the whole population. And if Australia doesn't hold back these young guys or new immigrants, obviously it will impact the population. My question is about the aging population of Australia. Many people, they are getting old, obviously, and newcomers are less than baby born. Even their fertility rate is in negative. I think it's except the Victoria, which is positive. If we see as a whole in Australia, it's a negative.
Right.
So, what do you think in coming days from migration perspective, the aging, the population? What industry can be boomed or in coming days, and in which industry the Australia will require more people to come in to support that industry if we see from this perspective?
Well, even putting aside the net migration phenomenon, if you will, which we are still kind of suffering from post-COVID pandemic. All of those overseas international students that left because of the pandemic and as a result of the pandemic, even though many of them or many who replaced them have come back, we're still not back to pre-pandemic pandemic levels in terms of overseas students. But to address your question, the Australian population is indeed aging, and it has aged increasingly fast. I was just looking at a graph, a chart, that charts out the average age in Australian population since the year of 1997, and it's remarkable, how the graph is quite steep. Now, this is doing two things. It's affecting skill shortages in two ways. Number one, as Australians age, that means, on the average anyways, it means there are less people of working age that are available to fill, whatever the occupation.
Contribute to the economy.
Yeah, whether it's on a CSOL list or not. So that's one thing. The second fold is, as the same Australians age, guess what? They are requiring more aged care services, more disability care services, more palliative care services. And these kinds of services and the occupations involved in these services are some of those what we call persistent skill shortages. In other words, they're nothing new. We just have the aging population is just providing more of a reason for those kinds of occupations to remain. And, and it's keeping everyone, including Home Affairs, away from even thinking about removing them from the occupation list. So those are really the two effects, if you will, that the continuing aging population of Australia is having on the skill shortage.
All right. So my understanding, the observation after that answer, that in coming days, Australia, as they have already introduced this labor agreements and etc., Australia would definitely need more aged care workers and individual care workers because population is aging. They need support, right. And this support cannot be provided by robots or AI or someone working remotely, right, as compared to technology. Let's say if we talk about the technology thing, that can be, obviously the sensitive technology should be in-house in Australia because of the cybersecurity things. Right. And it can be, the demand can be fulfilled remotely sometimes. But if we see this industry, the aged care industry, uh, it cannot be fulfilled because they need actually people to look after people instead of technology to look after people.
That's correct. There's been some initiatives, ever since AI and robotics and all that advancement began to develop. People who are very much involved in it, they try to find all kinds of applications for use of that new technology. So there's been a couple of initiatives that I've heard about out there about applying AI to the aged care and disability services, but these so far have only been very limited initiatives. They're not really in practice. And if you ask me, I would say, I would think that they don't really have a very good shot at applying such technology because a core a skill that a provider of aged care services or disability care services have to provide is that human empathy.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a robot, in spite of everything that we've seen in the media, I've never really seen a robot that
Crying.
Yeah.
Or laughing.
Yeah. And if they do display empathy, it seems artificial.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's what the aged patients want,
Yeah, they need empathy and emotional support and care. But that's why they call care worker.
The human touch is essential.
Yeah, so in coming days, obviously, they will need more people instead of the robots in aged care industry to look after people.
Very true. Very
Yeah, obviously, I will not I can't imagine a robot taking care of my parents or me, maybe.
I can imagine a robot delivering the mail to me. I think that's already in use in places like in Dubai.
But it doesn't need any emotions or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in Dubai, I think, at least part of the districts in Dubai, the postal service there now delivers mail via those quad hover...
the drone type?
drone type things, yeah.
Okay,
all right. And that's already in practice, but only in limited service areas.
Maybe that doesn't require any emotions.
No, I don't need the postman or woman to say, oh, I'm empathizing with you and that sort of thing. I just need them to deliver the mail.
Yeah, deliver it and just, that's great. Thank you, Manhal. I just want to know, what do you think, because in Australia, there are 6 states, 2 territories,
right,
and they all have different kind of skill set. Economy is based on different industries.
Very true.
So what do you think, if we see the state-wise, which occupations will be demand in different states in coming days? When we talk about these occupations in demand in coming days, obviously indirectly it's linked to the migration, but if you please shed some light in perspective of in coming days, state-wise, different occupations in demand. So we will have for our audience, we'll have an insight here.
Sure. Jobs and Skills Australia, in transmitting all this advice and information to Home Affairs, they also do it by state and territory. And that is because when they prepare all of this data, they engage all kinds of stakeholders, entities like employee unions, regulatory bodies, and even state and territory governments.
Okay.
And so, yes, the information is definitely tabulated on a state and territory level, not just on a national level. So in states like New South Wales, for example, there continues to be a need for healthcare professionals, a severe need for healthcare professionals, finance professionals, ICT professionals. Whereas, as a point of contrast, in Western Australia, there's a lot of demand for, mining engineer professionals, project management people, and that sort of thing, because that's where the bulk of the natural resources are. In other occupations like teacher, especially STEM teachers, for example, there's a severe and persisting shortage in rural and regional areas all across all the states. All right, and the territories, yeah. Once you get out of those metropolitan cities, it is very, very difficult to find qualified teachers to fill many vacant jobs, and the Department of Education really suffers a lot from that.
All right.
But in the metro areas like here in Sydney and Melbourne and so on, there's more of a balance between the supply and demand, and so it's really more in the regional areas.
All right. So it means there are some occupations, they are in demand across Australia.
Right.
They are state-based, as you suggested, that let's say in Western Australia, they have mining there, they need construction, the project managers, and as technology is in New South Wales and in ACT, so the more technology people, they are needed here in these states. Speaking of these new technologies, there is another thing, it's a renewable energy.
Yes.
So Australia is very much focused on that. They try to catch up with the world stage. They want to take a place. So, and what do you think if someone is interested in renewable energy, in which state it will be more in demand, like in Australia especially? Because as we say, all states have the different kind of occupations in demand. So what do you think in perspective of the renewable energy, where it would be in demand?
Good question. Specifically with renewable energy, the shortages and the demand basically is driven by the climate patterns in the various states and territories. So, for example, in Victoria and South Australia, they're quite advanced in wind and solar energy generation. And so there are a lot of jobs, demand for jobs that are related to those industries. Whereas, for example, in Western Australia and in Queensland, they're big on hydrogen energy and battery storage and so on and so forth. And so there's demand for like mining, R&D, and logistics kind of jobs. So yes, definitely, when we look at skill shortages, it's almost like real estate. It's location.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's there are parallels that you can draw on skill shortages and demands for occupations that you can draw across the entire nation. But then there are shortages that are definitely only specific to a certain state or territory, or even furthermore to certain areas, mostly rural areas of a certain state and territory.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much, Manal. That's a great insight, and I actually learned a lot from you after this podcast.
I learned a lot from my research, in order to prepare for.
Obviously, that makes us smarter anyway. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you have any question, any query, you can comment in the comment box and we will try to cover your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.